I'm not going to lie. I said to him, Charlie, this is just a ridiculous idea.
Got shot down a bit. I think the timing was, we were having pretty awful conversations just before that around, who to put on furlough, 60% salaries, how to survive. And then I come up with this random idea and everyone's like, don't be so ridiculous, concentrate on what you're doing. Yeah, and I think that's what sets startups apart, and particularly ours, is we give that freedom to every single employee, whether you're an intern or, you're a founder. Everyone has the freedom to chip in with ideas, validate them. We're all about, idea validation, then make it happen.
Welcome to the Insider Startup Podcast, where each week we bring you cutting-edge insights into the behind-the-scenes world of rapidly growing businesses and successful entrepreneurs. So, who is behind the pod? Well, each week you will join me, your host, Charlie Stewart, and my co-pilot, another Charlie Barron, who is the co-founder of the Up company. That name may not be familiar to you yet, however, our brand name certainly will be. Charged Up is Europe's largest phone charging network, and Cleaned Up is the UK's largest distribution network of hand sanitizer dispensers. Very handy in this COVID world, of course. Our growth over the last 2 years has enabled us to meet and learn from some truly inspirational and insightful individuals who have provided their pearls of wisdom to us in order to help our business grow. We are now going to get them on the pod and have them share their wisdom with you to hopefully provide some inside information on how to grow your business, your personal brand, and provide advice you don't get in school. This week, we thought it made sense to start with ourselves and tell our own startup story, how we grew from a team of 4 up to 50 amazing team members, whilst also growing a network of partners from a few dozen in East London to over 40,000 across Europe. Joining me today is the founder and CEO of the Up company, Hugo Tilmouth, and co-founder and co-pilot, Charlie Barron, to talk about their journey and how we got to where we are today. We talk about what it takes to grow a business from nothing, how to find and raise investments, how to hire a superstar team, and also how to survive in really tough circumstances. Yes, we are talking COVID. I now pass you over to my future self. Enjoy. Okay, this week I am joined by 2 of the co-founders of Charged Up / Cleaned Up. Let's go over to Hugo first. Hello. To introduce himself, and then Charlie can follow on shortly after. So Hugo, if you could let everyone know who you are, what you do.
Why am I here?
Why are you here?
All of these questions.
Your existential crisis.
He's been roped into this.
Hello, so my name is Hugo Tilmouth. I am founder and CEO of Charged Up, the Cleaned Up project, the Up company, whatever it is now. We're doing a few bits and pieces now, but that's what I do.
Excellent.
Awesome. That's a good intro. So I'm one of the other co-founders, and I lead the kind of commercial side of the business, so partnerships, business development, sales as well.
It's quite busy.
Pretty busy recently.
And so, for the vast majority of people who will be either listening or watching on our YouTube channel or across our various social media platforms, they might know a little bit about what we do as a core business in terms of what Charged Up is. But for those who don't and are completely new to who we all are, what is Charged Up? What is our business? And all the juicy details that go along with that.
Yeah. Cool, I'll take it on. Charged Up, it's pretty simple. It's the Boris bike of phone charging. You can pick up one of our batteries from over 3,000 locations across Europe. You rent it for £1 an hour and you can drop it back anywhere in the network. So it's a super simple concept. Obviously, it took a few years to get it to be as simple and seamless as it is today. But we've now launched that in 3 different countries now. We're expanding across the globe. We've had great traction in the UK. And I guess today we're going to talk about what happened when big Rona came to town and shut down some of our venues.
Anything to add on that, Charlie, or has it been summarised perfectly there?
It's almost as if we planned the whole coronavirus to happen. Because I think from the outset, obviously Charged Up was the first product that we produced, but always around how do we build products and services for retail, hospitality, venues, and obviously with the pivot, we have actually stuck to that same kind of mantra. It's just a completely separate product.
So we will come on to the purpose behind everything that we do. But in terms of what we're doing, we've alluded to it in the very early stages of this. We obviously gained quite a lot of traction with Charged Up, had a lot of success, got a lot of fantastic relationships, and things were really going places. And then, as has been the case across the world, suddenly a pandemic sweeps the globe, everything's shut down, all of our venues, which have our units in, are forced to close, and therefore, not just ourselves, but every single business is thinking, what can we do in this time to not only keep things ticking over internally, but also provide some positive value to the world in what is a difficult time. And so what is Cleaned Up? How does it differentiate from Charged Up? And it's a pretty big pivot, a full 180, so to speak. And within that, how do you move from having an idea of doing something which is completely different to what we've been doing over the last 3 years to actually then execute on something which has entirely new supply chains, new products, all that sort of stuff? How did the idea come about, and how did you both start to action that and put it into place?
Charlie, do you
sure,
want to
yeah. So Cleaned Up in a nutshell essentially is a network of hand sanitization dispensing stations, essentially placed at the front of any venue that we work with. You've probably seen them in the London Underground as well. Essentially, it's a large capacity dispensing station that is super functional, super easy to use, and is, I guess, trying to help combat COVID at the moment and allow people to go back to normality as quickly as possible.
And if we rewind slightly to just before coronavirus, we'd obviously put a lot of capital into our new medium stations, which we were really excited to roll out to huge footfall venues like shopping centres, airports, train stations. That was about to happen. Then coronavirus comes in, and we've got 150 metal casings sat in a warehouse somewhere that aren't doing anything, that we're not going to be able to utilise for the next, we didn't know at the time how long this was going to go on for. And so what was it about having that hardware sat away somewhere that gave the idea that this could actually be repurposed into something more useful at the time?
Yeah, I think the timing, particularly for us, was pretty awful with COVID, because we, like you said, we're working on this project for about 4 months in terms of we were moving into a different vertical in Charged Up. So Charged Up's normally in hospitality, particularly pubs, bars, and we'd been working incredibly hard. You yourself, our transport guru, who's been working around the clock getting us into transport, which we know is going to be a huge opportunity for Charged Up, and it was always going to be our kind of dream vertical to get into. And we'd just secured our first airport. We're moving into train stations. Therefore, we built this brand new kind of form factor for our units. So they're usually small tabletop ones that you would have seen in a pub or bar. We designed a completely new form factor which essentially incorporated the smaller units into much larger metal freestanding kind of cabinet units that were then going to be put into airports for really high footfall locations. So we had all these produced, 150 of them, quite expensive to make. It took a bit of convincing for the FD to sign that off, because it was a brand new kind of product, I guess. We hadn't really proven that it was going to work, but we went for it. So when COVID hit, we had to completely pause that. We were literally going to install, I think, the following week into one of the airports. COVID hit, and then I guess the story, as we say, is we were, speaking at length around furlough and
what are we going to do?
All the kind of things we're going to do.
Yeah, what are we going to do to solve the problem?
And Hugo's having those great chats with the CFO and our investors and trying to survive, basically. And then I, fortunately, had a bit more headspace to just think...
Charlie doesn't have to do the difficult job.
Just to provide some context on this, I've been at Charged Up for about a year now, and Charlie will regularly come up with ideas which... some of them fantastic and some of them very interesting, to say the least, as opposed to use a negative. So, Hugo, obviously you've heard Charlie come to you with lots of different things that he thinks will work really well. When he came to you about the idea of repurposing this unit, which we've paid a lot of money for, we're going to have our stations in, and suddenly wants to use that and put 10-litre plastic sanitizer bags in and make them into hand pumps, What were your initial thoughts around that?
I'm not going to lie. I said to him, Charlie, this is just a ridiculous idea. I think if he went back in Slack, he could find the exact conversation.
I've got it screen.
He's going to put it up on the wall.
Screenshotted it.
Honestly, like I said, like this is not our bag. We're a tech company. We need to focus on what we do best, which is rolling out a network. Building a great product. With our hundreds of thousands of users on our app, and just keep focused on that, because ultimately most startups get killed off because they lose focus and they go after some random new idea. So it really took some convincing, but as Charlie always does, he was very adamant that this was going to be a success, and he actually went out and started talking to clients, and ultimately money talks, and he managed to get some people who were willing to pay us for these things. And in a time when you're not making much money across the business, you're literally we dropped down all salaries across the company to 60%. We did some pretty severe things. Like, luckily, because of doing that, we didn't have to let anyone go, which was obviously quite a nice thing for us to be able to do in what was quite a tough time. And then when good old Rishi announced the furlough scheme, we started using that, and we were just really trying to make sure that the company was okay, because that's ultimately what we've been working on for the last 3 years, and what kept us all going every day. So at that point, we thought, what can we do to solve this? And came in with this idea.
Yeah, so I think when I originally pitched it to, I think it was our heads of department Slack channel, obviously got shot down a bit. I think the timing was, we were having pretty awful conversations just before that around, who to put on furlough, 60% salaries, how to survive. And then I come up with this random idea, and everyone's like, don't be so ridiculous, concentrate on what you're doing. Yeah. And I was just so adamant about it, because I just saw a real opportunity. And then I actually ended up basically just recruiting a couple of people internally without you knowing. Our design team and some various other people basically formed a mini company within Charged Up, and just started sprinting with this idea. Essentially, we designed the kind of prototype very quickly, got our manufacturing partners on board. I think even before you knew, I'd kind of pitched it to them, and they said, oh, it's possible. Even they were like, yeah, it's a bit of a weird idea, but okay, if you're paying us, we'll do whatever you want. So it basically got it to a prototype stage, made it look really nice, and then pitched it out to a bunch of our clients, and then also reached out to a bunch of new clients. Like, I think Sainsbury's was the first one I reached out to, and normally you don't hear anything back from any retailers for about 6 months if you keep pestering them every week. They replied instantly, which is so unheard of, and got someone on the phone, and within a day they were very interested, can we explore this further? And that's then when I pitched it back to everyone with we've got traction, we've got this product, this is what it looks like, it's all possible, it's not going to cost us too much, this is now viable. Instead of just being an idea, it was actually kind of a bit of a business plan there. And then actually when we look back at it, it makes sense, because it's still doing the mantra we're trying to do, which is help our venues solve problems and provide services.
Well, that was the key thing that convinced me, is when you explained the thing, we were saying, okay, it's a bit of a random product. We don't manufacture chemicals. We're not a chemical company, and we don't ever want to be, but it was this idea that it goes back to our core philosophy, which is to create value for our venue partners and to expand our network. And it literally did exactly those two things. And phone charging was not high on anyone's radar at the point. Everyone was stuck at home. No one was thinking about how to keep your phone charged when you're on the go. All people were thinking about was, how do we keep ourselves safe? How do we keep our customers safe, especially as we try to reopen? So this kind of fit that core mantra of what we're trying to do, of expand the network and provide value to that network, and it fit it perfectly. So that's when I was convinced to actually, let's try this thing out. Let's make 150 of these units and see what happens.
I think there's two really important points which you're both responsible for in there, in regards to the definition of entrepreneurship is to be able to see an opportunity and go for it, but also to know that if you've initially had a negative perception towards an idea, but suddenly then can see, actually, no, this does have value, to be able to say, yeah, I was wrong, let's go ahead and do it? Because would you say that particularly in businesses where there are multiple founders, it's really important that you've all got your own individual skill set. So if you think that something is valuable and it's not going to be detrimental to the company, you exploring it, do you think it is really important that you have the ability to, I'm going to go and have a look at this in greater detail, make my case, bring the validation to then bring everyone around?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Yeah, and I think that's what sets startups apart, and particularly ours, is we give that freedom to every single employee, whether you're an intern or you're a founder. Everyone has the freedom to chip in with ideas, validate them. We're all about idea validation, then make it happen. And that's kind of what we're doing with all the other products we're now working on. Yep. And we'll avoid some of Charged Up and all the features that we made for that. If we were working for a larger company, this wouldn't have been possible because we wouldn't be agile enough.
I think it's really interesting. This goes back to just kind of being in the right place at the right time. There is always a degree of luck in any of these things, but in terms of where we are as a startup, we are not a kind of subscale startup with no resources, no funding, no cash in the bank. We're also not a super scale, super product market fitty company that just is motoring on that single product vision for the next 5 years. We're in this nice point where we could actually just pivot some of our team to sell something different, or pivot some of our departments to work on something different, hire people in to do those different roles. And, it was really quite ideal that we're at the stage that we are, because we were able to basically flip over the business overnight and go from deploying charging stations to deploying sanitizer stations at probably 100 times the speed that we were doing the sanitizer stations. It was quite insane, the difference in the two businesses. But I guess because we're in that kind of middle phase where we've got money in the bank, we can do stuff, but we've also got really supportive investors who are happy for us to test out new things, especially in COVID times. It's a difficult time to just stick to exactly what you're going to do. It allowed us to be a bit more flexible and go off and build what's now become a multi-million-pound business.
And do you think you touched on it briefly when it literally was overnight? I remember myself 1 minute I'm thinking, well, I haven't really got anything to do. No one wants to talk to me about phone charging. All of my contacts in the transport network are suffering massively. They haven't got time for me. To the next day, we've switched focus. This is what we're going to do now. And do you think the ability for a team to completely move on to something alien to them is testament to the types of individuals you look to employ from the outset? And it's not necessarily someone who's going to be focused on this one goal and one objective, but have a multitude of skills that, when required, can be applied to any different type of venture.
I think there's an element of both in there. I think what we found over the years of hiring people, making mistakes, hiring the wrong people, all of these fun parts of the startup journey, you have to hire for attitude. Skills can be learned ultimately. We've had people who've come in as literally first-time jobbers who are interns. We don't like to call anyone in Charged Up an intern because we think it's an irrelevant title. You are doing a role in the company, and we like to put people into positions of quite substantial responsibility. And we've had people who've come in as interns on paper who've ended up basically running entire functions because they were just so keen to take on that responsibility and just got handed so much more as time goes on.
Also so good at those responsibilities.
Yeah.
So and on your point, I've worked in bigger companies where actually the intern, like James Chapman, for example, joined us 18 years old, I think. Never really worked at another business before. And honestly, he's, if not better than most people I've worked with who in the same kind of function, who've been there 9 years, because he just thinks differently and is agile and is just incredibly, capable. And totally on that point, if you give them the freedom, I don't think he would ever have achieved what he's achieved if he went to another company where he was treated like an intern and just did one task. You would never get the full potential out of him. Whereas I think that's one of our best things is we get the full potential out of anyone that joins.
Definitely. And then in terms of, look, we've had this great initial success with the project. The 150 units that we had pre-made, all ready to go, we successfully retrospectively changed to be something completely new. They're all gone. A question that is probably likely to be asked is, okay, that's great. We had something in place there ready to go. How do you move from the early success of that to then building out the types of supply chain that we have now in terms of the manufacturing of a bespoke unit which is actually designed to be a hand sanitizer unit as opposed to, after the thought, putting it in place? But then also let's talk about some of the early sanitizer stories that we had, particularly, I mean, this is something completely new to us. You could sort of get away with the dispenser saying it's hardware, we do hardware, some sort of fits. But getting involved in sanitizer at that time, particularly when there was a lot of media hype around people, not playing fair in the market, hiking prices up massively. Yeah. What did we do to ensure that not only were we getting our sanitizer from people who actually had good products, which wasn't subpar, but also enabled us to be competitive in our pricing and ensure that we weren't ripping anyone off? Because that was the last thing we wanted, was to start charging key clients who really needed this product astronomical fees. So how do you move into a completely new product area where we've got no contacts whatsoever? How does that build out, and how do we get that all set up?
Sure. So on the hardware piece, we fortunately started working with a very capable manufacturing partner, like a very premium, high-end one that we knew we could grow into from the start. It's a really good lesson, actually, is don't just go for one that can just about do the job that you're getting them to do. One that can work with the biggest retailers in the UK. So they had scope to grow, which was really good. So as soon as we turned around and said we need a PO for 10 times more units, they could do it. So on the hardware front, fortunately, we worked with a great partner and we grew with them. On the sanitizer side, complete new line of business for us. We'd obviously never worked in that kind of industry before. It was a complete bunch of cowboys, to be honest, at the start. I think
we had some fun stuff, didn't we?
Yeah, myself, Ali, who's also in our team, I think you might have done a few of them as well, spoke with so many random people who just suddenly happened to be experts in hand sanitizer. Yeah. And obviously we needed to learn pretty quickly what hand sanitizer was and how to make it, the WHO formula. Fortunately, we have Antoine, who's a chemical engineer who knows quite a lot about it, so we leaned on him a lot. But I had conversations with someone that was trying to charge £80 per 5 litre to someone else trying to do 30 and whatever it was. And our whole thing was, we do not want to be ripping people off. We're here to make something that is valuable for venues, that is affordable. And these guys were in there for the short term. We were always in there for the long term. Yeah. So we went for a few different suppliers. As we grew, obviously, meant from smaller distilleries, which, to be honest, they were great to work with because they were trying to survive as well. They had gone from, it's a gin distillery in Edinburgh, making nothing and having to put all their staff on furlough. They started to make sanitizer, and we obviously went and checked on the quality. It was great, and we grew with them. But then since then, we've kind of moved on to much bigger, huge medical facilities, making the highest grade sanitizer you can make. But it was a bit of a journey along the way to find that eventual perfect partner.
Yeah. No, I think going back to the original question, how do you do it? The way you do it is you start doing it. That's ultimately how any of this stuff happens. You start making a battery company. How the hell do you make batteries that can be rented via an app? That seems impossible when you look at it on the surface. When you start breaking it down into little kind of projects or pieces or whatever, you just start solving those things as time goes on. And I think we have just taken that mentality that, quite literally anything is possible. If someone else has done that thing before, we will figure out a way of doing it, whether it's ourselves, whether we pull in people from our networks, whether we hire in people, whether we get experts, whatever it is, whether we subcontract it out. For example, we have no way to make 20,000 units in 7 days like we've just done for the big Diageo deal that we've just pulled off. But we were able to lean on our network and pull in experts who could manage that project and kind of, make it happen, basically. So it's I just think there is this really nice mentality in the up company and the charged up team that anything is possible, and it's literally just about problem solving. That's the only difficult bit, and that's what makes it all so fun.
And so that's what I was going to come to. Obviously, once we'd found the necessary supplier, albeit there was quite a few in the early days that we would flicker between as and when we needed. But once we had those supply chains in place and we had the products available, I say available because in the early days we were, of course, selling a lot more units than we actually had available to us at the time. Yeah. And so in those early days where now, obviously, we have a lot of the processes in place, we're able to turn things around extremely quickly, we know what all of our inventory is. You talked about it there in terms of problem solving. Do you think a lot of early stage businesses and entrepreneurship is all about just getting on with the job, and as and when problems and fires arise, just getting them sorted there and then, learning from that, ensuring that processes are put in place to mitigate that? Yeah. And how do you go about sort of chasing your tail on instances where we've sold a certain amount of units but we only have allocated stock, and managing all of those various different issues that become apparent?
Yeah, really difficult. There's
no silver bullet, is
there?
No,
that was the hardest part of the whole project, was actually selling. We were always trying to sell to how much we had, but of course we started selling stuff that we hadn't produced yet. But then obviously you're having to backdate and saying we'll get it to you in 3 weeks, and trust the supply chain that we can get it to them in 3 weeks.
And I think as well, that wasn't necessarily something that we planned to do. Yeah. We were just not expecting the level of interest and success that we had. Yeah. And of course the nature of the business is, well, whatever happens, whatever interest we have, whatever deals we have, we will make it work regardless, and that is what we managed to end up doing. But talking now into the sort of latter stages of the project, so to speak, and something that I think a lot of people will, on the surface, look at this project, look at us as a company, and think, how has a company who do innovative phone charging across the hospitality sector suddenly having thousands of dispenser units of sanitizer in TfL underground stations? How do you get the confidence and the belief in what you do to be able to approach those huge names where there are billions of people going through on an annual basis? How do you get them to listen to what you're saying and also have confidence in you that you'll deliver?
I think,
big question.
It's difficult. It's difficult. We were fortunate in the way that we had worked with big brands before. We've Charged Up. We've got investment from O2. We've got a huge partnership with them already for Charged Up. That helps. Having investors and having a track record in delivering helps. And we have worked with Westfields and we've worked with huge companies like before. So I don't think TfL would have happened unless we had already done that stuff with Charged Up before. And they ask for references, and they all, it's like almost like a job interview. If you haven't worked somewhere before, you're not suddenly going to go and work for Apple HQ. So we were fortunate in that regard, but then it is just a lot of it's relationship building at the end of the day. Like, they just had to trust us as a team, individuals. Unfortunately, we'd put a bit of groundwork in before with the likes of TfL, with Charged Up, that they then trusted us to do this. But it was also a lot about being agile and being able to move quickly. Yeah. They needed, it was pretty crazy actually, TfL deal. They needed 1,500 stations within 1 week for when they were reopening, because they shut down completely. Yeah. And then I think they were pretty much forced by the government to go, we need some good news here. We need to reopen the economy. We need to reopen London. But we need these safety measures in place. And we were the only ones that could actually turn that around as quick as we did.
Yeah. I don't know how we did.
I think it was...
Still don't know how we did.
Yeah. Part of it was we did take, I think, a bit of a risk, and we placed quite a large PO with our manufacturing partners, because this is what we do as a startup. We risk that we're going to place a 5,000 unit PO, even though we've only sold 1,000 of them. And luckily, it enabled us to do that kind of deal because we had the units already pretty much manufactured when they came calling. So that's another good lesson of, like, you do sometimes need to take quite big risks to get the big rewards, which we got. And
Hugo, Charlie touched on it in terms of how TfL might have had their hand forced by the government to reopen in order to get the economy going. Now, of course, in the initial stages of the project, we were all thinking about how can we keep ourselves busy, how can we utilise our team to the best of their ability, how can we keep the business going. But as we started to see that was going to be less of a concern, and we knew that was relatively safe, we could start bringing people back from furlough, for instance, increase salaries again. In terms of reopening the economy and giving confidence back to consumers, how did that sort of become, why is it so important for that to become our purpose as to why we're doing it beyond just sort of our survival of as being a business?
Yeah, like I think it's important for people to feel like they're doing something more than just grinding it out each day, especially when you are in this ridiculously weird situation that no one has been in before, where you are suddenly working from home, you're not seeing any of your team, you're working like 12-hour days, maybe even longer, because there's so much to be done, and your friends are all losing their jobs, and it's literally like horrendous environment around you. And then there's obviously the pandemic as well, just that little thing. And then if you have something that you can work on that makes you feel like you are actually doing something that is helping in this horrendous situation, that gets you out of bed every day. That gives you something to want to strive to do that extra hour or that extra bit of research on the market, or contact that extra person on LinkedIn or whatever it is, because you know that you're actually doing something that's useful and is going to help, even maybe it's in a small way, but help spread this disease that's killing people, literally killing people. So yeah, I think it's really important to have a slightly more I guess kind way of thinking about what you're working on.
I think that this project really, I was following it really aggressively because it wasn't just because it was commercially viable for us. To be honest, at the start, we weren't even thinking about how this is going to grow the business or make us money in any way. It was actually, it will pretty much break even, and it's just the right thing to do. Yeah. And that's what really drove me to carry on. Then I think it's what drove everyone to kind of change their mind on it. And then it drove all our team to get stuck in, because it's not very often that you can turn around to our whole team and go, stop what you're doing now, you're going to start doing this. Like we looked at every member of the team and went, this person's going to have to go into this function, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to start selling sanitizer. Like you weren't trained, you didn't come and join this business to sell sanitizer. No. You did it because it was going to change, it was actually going to make a difference.
Well, that's it. I mean, none of us, and maybe not even now, I would say are passionate about hand sanitizer, but what we are passionate about is helping people, making sure that we provide value to our partners, but also to the public. And of course, that is what, got us out of bed every morning, knowing that we're doing something that actually is doing something positive, helping, and ensuring that the spread of COVID is much reduced.
Yeah, and I think when you can actually look at almost the stats on it, which is pretty crazy when you really look, top level on this, like with the Diageo partnership, with the pubs is almost the front line at the moment for COVID. That's probably what the government are so scared about is, how is that going to affect the R rating or whatever it's called at the moment? And we're generally making a difference. I think it's probably millions of people are now using our sanitizing stations.
So you might have heard throughout this conversation Diageo being mentioned at various points of the discussion. Just so everyone's cleared up as to what the scope of that project is, what we're actually doing in our partnership with Diageo, what are some of the key takeaways from that particular partnership? What is it that we're actually doing?
Sure. So we're working very closely with them essentially to reopen the on-trade. They were incredibly supportive. Basically, we approached them originally with just an idea of how could you guys support us with growing what we're trying to do. They have a lot of ethanol, which was in very short supply at that time. So I was actually approaching them around how they could donate ethanol to us to try and kind of grow this business out. And then as the conversations developed, they realised actually this is a huge campaign which we should be doing for our venues. Similar to what we had in terms of for our network, we were doing this to help our network out. They're doing this to help their network, the pub industry out. So it turned into this thing which they've the campaign which is called Raising the Bar, which essentially is a global campaign. They've put $100 million into a fund to essentially help support the on-trades, whether that's through the health kits that we're providing, so the sanitizing stations and hand sanitizer. At the moment, that's just in the UK, but it could expand globally. So they're donating two sanitizing stations and 8 bottles of sanitizer, 8 5-litre bottles of sanitizer per pub. So it's a huge project, a massive kind of financial outlay from them, but a real big effort. Like they're pretty much most of their business was working on this. And it's made a real impact. Like the pubs have really responded well. And of course, they're the ones that were hit the worst in this crisis. They do not have the the funds to spend a lot on safety measures.
And if you are a pub or bar listening, where can they go to get access to this offer?
Sure. So it's on mydiageo.com. So it's the portal that Diageo uses to, you can order your new kegs and whatever else. I won't try and explain it better than they can. But yeah, mydiageo.com. Sign up to the Raising the Bar initiative, and then you'll be forwarded onto our website where you can place an order for the free unit.
Hugo, so we're talking about adding value to the economy, adding value to people's lives. What a lot of people might also be saying, and we touched on it briefly at the beginning, is how does this project and what it is that we're doing add value to the wider company, how it impacts Charged Up, how it will impact other products that we might introduce further down the line. What is it about this that has not only provided financial benefit and also sort of positive social impact? What does it mean for the wider business long term, and what does it enable us to do?
Well, that's a really good question. Some of that is top secret right now, but the stuff that we can talk about, clearly, it's expanding our network. Like I said right at the beginning of this discussion, our core value was to increase the size of the network and increase the value to each of those points on the network. And Cleaned Up did both of those and continues to do both of those. So we obviously have the intention to bring some of those Cleaned Up venues across to the Charged Up network and vice versa. We're looking to bring more products to them as time goes on as well. Again, further increasing the value that we can bring to those venues as a tech provider who can move incredibly quickly on opportunities. I guess I'll leave it at that, but we've got some announcements coming soon. It'll be exciting to share what we've been working on.
Yeah, I think just in general around the team building as well, like we've gone from having to furlough most of the staff to growing the team by I think another 12 or 13 people. It seems to grow now.
I think I was on a sales training call this morning with 9 new faces who I'd never seen before. So
it's definitely more than 12.
So that from that point of view, the amount of people we've directly hired and then indirectly hired in a way through the networks of manufacturing partners and delivery logistics providers.
Well, we calculated the other day that it was, I think, 60 plus people have been employed, indirectly by the Raising the Bar, the Cleaned Up project that we've been working on, which is pretty insane. It's a large chunk of people that this one project has given full-time employment to, I've literally been to the factories where they've said, I've literally just come back from furlough. The guy that gave us the tour had come back from furlough because of the project, and that's pretty cool. That we're, it's not something that we ever thought we'd be able to do, but it's something that we're now doing is providing jobs in the economy that wouldn't have been there and potentially would have been gotten rid of as time went on, as the situation got worse, perhaps. So it's pretty cool that we're doing that.
And as furloughs kind of starting to stop as well, they generally would be out of jobs.
And so in terms of final thoughts now, both of you, if you had to have one key takeaway from, of course the project is still ongoing, we're not at the end of it yet, but the hard slog, so to speak, and all of the difficulties that we've had are now hopefully behind us, touch wood. What would you take from that, and what advice would you give for anyone who is either looking to start a business soon as this pandemic comes to an end, and what key lessons have been learned?
Let's go.
Yeah, you go for it.
I think the key advice to someone looking to start a business, especially in these weird times, is that you just gotta go for it. Like this is the perfect time to start a business, because when there is great change, there is great opportunity. I don't know who said that, but it's a great quote. And it's completely true. When the whole world is shifting underneath you, if you are able to move quickly and execute plans quickly, you can actually win in these markets. It is ridiculous that Charged Up, a technology business, was able to effectively win the market for sanitizer in the UK. That should not have happened. But because we're incredibly quick, we were able to, jump on the wave and ride it. And, we managed to hire brilliant people and get brilliant suppliers and made that happen. Like that is the exact same case for, someone who's thinking about starting a business to help, I don't know, whatever it is right now that people are struggling with, whether it's queuing outside of Sainsbury's, or if you're I don't know, trying to do lift sharing with people and you want to social distance from them. There's all sorts of problems that are happening right now that everyone is experiencing, and there's no technology solution or product that can solve that right now. So I think this is a great time to just dive into it. And if you're on furlough, you've got loads of time on your hands.
I think it levels the playing field a lot in terms of everyone. There's brand new problems that have now suddenly come. Everyone's trying to, well, not everyone, but you're on the same level playing field as someone else. So just go for it. And if you work hard and they will, you've got quite a high chance that you're going to be the one that wins.
And it's also just not being scared to approach behemoth companies. If you've got something of value to add to them, they will listen, regardless of who you are. But that's enough for today. Thank you both for joining me. You didn't really have a choice. We are in the office, so I just grabbed you over. If you are listening and you are in, across the TfL network, Network Rail, Network, Costa, Specsavers, wherever you might see one of our units, make sure you sanitize your hands, stay safe, and we'll see you. And think of me, yes. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to episode 1 of the Insider Startup Podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to our story, and hopefully you can take some of the lessons we learned to implement into your own startup. Next week, we have our first guest on the podcast, and it is one you do not want to miss. If you did enjoy the podcast, please remember to subscribe on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, and share it with friends and colleagues. Why not? If you are listening and you think you have some valuable insights to share with the world, you can search for Charged Up across all social platforms and get in touch with us. We would love to hear from you and maybe have you on the pod. Until next time, goodbye.